A new film by the Steve Jaggi Company is on release in cinemas across Australia, a film called Mistletoe Ranch. And it's my great pleasure to be speaking to the director of Mistletoe Ranch, Rhiannon Bannenberg. Rhiannon, welcome to Movie Metropolis.
Thank you, Peter. Thanks for having me.
Good to talk to you. And I know that you previously directed Dive Club, which Claire Harris wrote, and you collaborated again on Mistletoe Ranch. What was the inspiration behind the storyline of this romantic drama?
I've been very fortunate to be able to work with the Steve Jaggi Company a few times, as well as Claire. I think the inspiration really was I think Steve's company was quite interested in making a few romantic Christmas films. They have done some previous romances. I know you've spoken to Christine Luby, I believe, previously. And so the idea behind this one really was something that was going to be aimed at in the world of Christmas. And so I guess there was an initial idea, and then I came on board once there was sort of already a bit of a draft happening, and then I was sort of involved from that point onwards, and we evolved the story from there. But it was always set around Christmas, and always a story about rekindling past loves, which is quite interesting because in these films often the characters meet for the first time and they actually fall in love throughout the film, and they're new to each other. But what's unique about this story is they're actually ex-fiancés, so they've actually got a whole history with each other, which was really great because there's a dynamic that's already set up that you can then mine, and that chemistry is already there, which was quite satisfying, I think, for myself as the director and for the actors as well.
Yes, I found that very interesting, that sort of backstory where we see at the start the romance being kindled on this ranch, and then of course it's revitalized later on. So I found that an interesting storyline. Tell me about the casting, because you have some very interesting actors there, many of which I don't recognize. Tell me about finding the right actors for the roles.
Yeah. So we were really fortunate with our casting here. We have some beautiful, beautiful cast. So we have Mercy Cornwall and Jordi Weber as our leads. I've worked with Mercy Cornwall before on Dive Club. So it was an absolute pleasure to have her back. Jordi Weber's actually from New Zealand. So I will say the whole film is set in America. So they're all playing Americans, but they're actually all Australians, or, Jordi's from New Zealand. We have Molly Wright, who plays our little Juniper, and she's 8, 9 years old, and she's quite remarkable. When anyone sees the film, she's an absolute star. And then we have other great actors. We've actually got Charles Allen, who is actually American. He plays Charlie. We've got Andrea Moore, Kimberly Joseph, and Ellie Popov. So it's not a big cast, but they very much formed an ensemble. They were absolutely delightful to work with. And what was particularly lovely is they all had a real love of Christmas. And so there was this real, even though we were filming in February, there was this real collegial spirit around wanting to make something that did have a lot of heart around Christmas, and everyone really did love Christmas. And I think that is totally translated in the film. I think if you have a film made by people who don't really care for Christmas, that would potentially show. But I think all of our love of Christmas sort of came through in the way they approached whatever their role was, whether they're an actor or a crew member as well.
Okay, very interesting. The music I notice is by Angela Little, and there are some songs in the film, especially as the lead sing a song, which I'm assuming they were dubbed, but you can fill me in on that. But tell me about the use of music in the film.
Yeah, so I actually come from a music background. So that's actually how I got into filmmaking. So music is always, for me, a big in on a film, and particularly seeing as, when I first signed up for this, it was going to be, a Christmas film. one way that I have experienced Christmas a lot is through music. You know, I've sung in choirs and been involved with a lot of Christmas music. So I was very keen to incorporate that into the film. And because I knew that Mercy Cornwall was a beautiful singer, I knew that. And then when I came across Jordi Weber, he's a great singer as well. So it is actually them singing.
Oh, it is.
So all the singing in the film, it is actually all of them. It's actually Molly singing, the little girl. That's actually her singing as well. So they're all very musical. And that was part of the reason why I cast them, because they're not just really solid actors. They were musical as well. And I thought that that would be, for me, music is, it's the universal language. It's something that can tell us so much and give us such a particular feeling and create such a nostalgic feeling. And using some classic Christmas songs within the film was very exciting to me. And because I had these actors who were beautiful singers, I thought, why not? So I really tried to utilize that, and I think they really enjoyed that as well. And the original music written by Angela Little Angela's great. I worked with her on Dive Club. She's a wonderful composer, and she had an absolute ball on this film. She loves Christmas, and I think it's really interesting if you sort of listen to the original theme that we created, that Angela created. It's actually based off some of those classic Christmas carols and hymns. So she's actually constantly making a nod and a reference to some of these beautiful old Christmas songs. So that was very much the basis of the music, and became a bit of a character in the film as well.
Very interesting to hear that, and thanks for clearing that up. They're the two then leads are multi-talented. That's very.
They are. It's all them. It's all them.
Very impressive. Now, the film is set in Montana on a ranch, and of course, it was shot in Queensland. Tell me about the logistics of the shoot and getting all that snow.
Oh, yes. It's the question everyone wants to know, because it was quite a feat. So yes, it's the film is set, it's America, it's cold, it's snowy, and of course we filmed in the antithesis of that. We filmed in hot, sunny Queensland in February. No snow to be found. So it was quite a challenge, but it required a lot of teamwork, really, between our production designer, Daniela Rigby. So there was a lot of discussions about what could we do practically in camera. And so a lot of experiments about different methods to get, physical fake snow. And some of those methods had to be ruled out straight away. We did some tests, and, for example, there's ways where you can use a foam-based snow. But because it was so humid, it literally was evaporating within 10 seconds. So we couldn't use that. We had different mixes of different sort of corn flour and cornstarch and all sorts of things. And then we also had to use a mix with VFX in post-production. So marrying the two actually worked quite well. We also then, of course, it was a discussion with Tony O'Loughlin, our cinematographer. How were we actually going to shoot it, light it? We were battling midday Queensland sun, which obviously is just not going to give you that right feeling. So we were sort of limited and had to work around that. And then I think the other element that helped sell the cold world was the costumes. So Stephanie Bannenberg did the costumes, and there was a lot of discussion about how to dress the cast so that visually we had that sense of them being cold and rugged up, but also accommodating the actors, because it was actually very warm. So it was really a trifecta, of discussions and working together. But at the end of the day, I'm actually quite pleased at how everyone's efforts worked out, and it did come together. And of course, you've got the grade as well, which helped. And we filmed in the Gold Coast hinterland area, and we did manage to find some locations that had, the pine trees, or they had the right sort of vegetation or architecture that lent itself to being covered in snow, and it didn't feel too Australian. So it was yeah, constant problem solving, but also that's fun, right? That's making a movie. It's all an illusion, and that's very creative and fun. And as long as it's, you know, it looks like there's snow in that screen, in that frame, doesn't matter if they're, you know, what's on the other side.
Absolutely, the magic of filmmaking, and yes, it does look great. It's I'm very impressed. And tell me about the actual location of the. Is it stables or is it a homestead, whatever that you used for filming? And did that include the interiors, or was that also shot in a studio?
So we didn't shoot in a studio at all. We shot completely on location, all around the Gold Coast and the Gold Coast hinterland. So the stables were a fantastic find. It's actually a polo club. So so they were very handsome stables, really, really beautiful, quite expansive. So we filmed all the stables at that polo club. And then we filmed everything of the house at a different location. And then, so we filmed for 15 days. So we sort of had 3 week, you know, 3 5-day blocks, stables, house. And then the last 5-day block was sort of a mix of, you know, where we film, you know, in our New York studio and a few other little, and the church and that sort of thing. So yeah, all out on location in some beautiful spots that we found around the Gold Coast hinterland. And yeah, but the stables were definitely a favorite of mine. And we also were able to bring in a few of the polo horses to dress them in the stables and that sort of thing as well. So that was good fun. Except they were very noisy, so they didn't end up being in as many scenes as we would have liked, because when we brought them into the stables, these polo horses, you know, they're quite hot-headed, you know, as you can imagine they need to be to play a game of polo. And they were all talking to each other and stuff. And of course, we're trying to shoot dialogue, and so just, you know, we had to send them back out because they were being too talkative.
Mr. Ed, where are you?
Right.
How interesting to hear that. And gee, 15 days, that's a very quick shoot. I'm impressed.
It is, Peter, it is. Yeah. It was very quick, and it, you know, really it comes down to just meaning you need to be very well organized and make sure that we're getting everything we need, because you know, when you shoot for 15 days, you end up using everything you've shot really in the edit. You know, it's very tight. And there's not much, you know, there's not much fat to trim out of anything. So it's quite efficient in that way, I suppose.
And I can imagine you worked with the actors in advance to make sure that they got their lines and their scenes right, so that when you were shooting, you had minimal takes, as you were suggesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we were not really afforded a lot of time for takes. So yes, I did have a chance to work with them a little bit beforehand. I think in particular, it was important to set up the relationship between James, who's the father character, and his daughter. That was important because they were, you know, strangers to each other. And so making sure that Molly was comfortable, and likewise that Jordi was comfortable with Molly, and I spent a bit of time developing their relationship, which was really great, so that would come across on screen. But really, I have to say, even though time was limited, the whole cast, you know, really took that upon themselves to get together, to bond, to, you know, they were just wonderful. So it really wasn't actually it wasn't too difficult. They were all very motivated themselves to do that as well, which is hugely helpful when you don't have a lot of time.
Of course. No, you did very well to get all that sorted. Well done. I noticed a bit of use in terms of nostalgia purposes for some 8mm or 16mm film to show the past and so on. Was that actual 8mm or 16mm film, or was that sort of digital enhanced projection, or how did that work?
So some of it was digitally enhanced, and then other bits were actually 8mm and 16mm that we did source. So it was a mix. Yeah, it was a mix of both. But yeah, I think a few of us on this, right, we love the tactile nature, and you know, the main character in this film is a photographer and she shoots on film, so it felt like a nice kind of link to her own craft. you know, her being in the dark room and using a camera, and then showing some of those story elements through that old tactile medium. So yeah, that was definitely something that, you know, that we all sort of enjoyed playing around with, for sure.
Okay, very good. Now, the film has been made. I noticed that the Steve Jaggi films tend to be for both the American market and for the Australian market. Tell me about the way the film is being rolled out. I know it's in cinemas in Australia at the moment.
Yeah, so it came out, I believe, on Thursday, on the 17th of November. So it came out in Australia around, in cinemas around Australia, I think predominantly in event cinemas. So that's out at the moment, and we've got a few weeks of screening leading into Christmas. Obviously, a good sort of time to be seeing this film, get into the Christmas spirit, and then it will also be being released in the US, and, you know, around the world. Across different streaming platforms and that sort of thing. So I don't know the exact details of all of that yet, but yeah, it will definitely be being released very soon, around, you know, all around the world. So there's a lot of opportunity for people to see it wherever they are.
Okay, very good. Just as an aside, the accents that the Australian actors used and the New Zealand actor, was it easy for them to adopt that sort of American twang, if you like to put it that way?
I think it actually was, because a lot of these, I mean, some of the cast were actually, you know, they're actually Native American speakers, so that was great. And it was particularly great having Charles Allen on set, because there were certain words in the script that were potentially probably more Australian than American. And it was actually great. There were a few times where he came up to me and said, "Oh, look, we'd actually probably say this instead of that." So that was great to sort of have someone who on the ground who could sort of advise and get the right vernacular. But on the whole, look, a lot of these actors, and particularly, you know, Mercy and Jordi, they're doing all their auditions in American accents, so they're quite comfortable doing scenes, you know, in an American accent. So it was something that I think they had a lot of fun with. But it's just always that thing, you know, where they've got to, you know, some actors like to stay in the accent, some don't. And I think that the really interesting thing was for Molly, who's, you know, I think she's only 8, for her to stay in the American accent, but she did a wonderful job. And sometimes, you know, I would talk to her in an American accent, which is dreadful, but, you know, it was just to sort of get the right R sounds and that sort of thing. It was, you know, obviously it didn't matter how I sounded, just to sort of remind her, oh, that's right, we're in an American accent today. But she did beautifully. So I think on the whole, yeah, they were all very competent and comfortable doing it. Yeah.
What an interesting process. So well, well done on that. Now, Rhiannon, I know that you also directed Riptide. What is it that got you into filmmaking in the first place?
Oh, well, I think I mentioned before my background's actually in music. So I actually always had aspirations to be a film composer. So I went off to uni and studied music. And in my early 20s, I was very keen to write a score for a feature film, but I was, you know, 19, 20 years old, had never done that before and didn't really know how to find that opportunity. So I actually made a feature so that I could score it, which, you know, in hindsight is a very big project to do, simply to write some music. To, you know, write, direct, shoot, edit a feature. But it was a fantastic experience. I made it with my you know, school and uni friends, and it was from that film I then realized, oh, you know, there's a job called directing, and I quite like this, you know, the screenwriting aspect and working with actors and cinematography. And then I ended up literally just doing directing work from then on. So I continued my studies at uni and did my film composition and that sort of thing, which has been very helpful and useful as a director, because obviously music is a huge part of any film. But yeah, it was literally through the music that I sort of discovered directing, and haven't really stopped doing it since. So yeah, that's sort of an interesting path into it, but I've never met anyone who's had the same path into filmmaking. Everyone's got a different story. There doesn't seem to be one way. And that's something that I always say to people, particularly if I've spoken to younger people. There isn't one path. It's, you've got to follow the way that, excites you, and also follow the opportunities that present themselves, I suppose. But yeah, through the music.
How interesting, and what great advice. Which university was it?
So I studied in Sydney at the Australian Institute of Music, yeah, where they have a lot of fantastic music courses. So yeah, I did the Bachelor of Music there, and then a Master in Music in film composition.
How
Yeah.
very, very interesting to hear that.
Mm.
And so, Rhiannon, I must ask you, are you working on another film at the moment?
I'm always working on another film, Peter. I've always got something cooking, always a few different things. Yes, I've got a few different projects that are, I'm writing some things. I've got a few projects that I'll be directing. So they're all sort of looking like they'll be happening next year at some point. But yeah, I've got a few things on the way, and not sure which one will take flight first, because you often don't know until the very last minute. But I've got a few things that are going on, which are keeping me busy, which is good. So I think next year will be an exciting year, and I'm sure I'll be working on something fun.
Look forward to that. Are there any particular films that you perhaps use as a model for your filmmaking? Any particular filmmakers, or anything that you might respect that perhaps has influenced the way you approach filmmaking?
Oh gosh. I mean, of course, there's so many wonderful films and filmmakers out there. I absolutely, oh gosh, I actually really, really love and respect Ron Howard as a director, because I'm quite interested in filmmakers that don't necessarily have a specific style, or they've crossed lots of different films. So something I like about him is, he's done documentaries, he's done dramas, he's done family films, he's done obviously the big Hollywood blockbusters, he's done more independent work. So I find that a very interesting career to follow. But in terms of, I actually love a lot of French cinema. I love Michel Gondry's films, which are totally different to what I'm making at the moment. But I do love watching those things. And I love a lot of my favorite films are films from the 90s, and a lot of children's family films. So Little Princess, The Secret Garden, some of those films that were based on classic books. They're some of my favorite films, and they are actually, interestingly enough, they do probably fall in the family children's sort of genre. But they're beautifully crafted films, and they're very sophisticated. They've got exquisite actors, they've got great screenwriting, beautiful music. And I really admire people who make products for different audiences, but they never dumb it down or tone it down depending on the audience. I that's something that I really enjoy as well. So I mean, I watch all sorts of stuff, and that's such a difficult question to answer, Peter. But yeah, definitely presently someone that I do always enjoy watching their films is Ron Howard.
Okay, no, that's fair enough. And
Yeah.
the whole
Mm.
issue of family films, and that has sort of been lost a little bit. And so this is very much a strong niche market, because Mistletoe Ranch, for example, is very much a family film. There's no violence, there's no sex or anything like that. It's very much designed for a much broader audience. And to some extent, perhaps a lot of filmmakers have ignored that, and so it's great to see you doing this, and the Steve Jaggi Company doing a lot of these films like that.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's I think, as I said, it just sort of not even realizing some of my favorite films are family films. And I think a good family film has those layers built in. So it's got, it's got to operate for the adults and it's got to operate for the children. And it's fine that the children might not understand everything that, obviously is obvious to the adults, and then vice versa. That's great. That's actually, I think, is as a part of what makes these films so layered and to be able to be enjoyed by different generations. And I think there is something in creating a film or a product or whatever that can be enjoyed through the generations together. That's interesting, rather than you go and watch your film, I'll go and watch my film, and you never share that experience. So I certainly have enjoyed that as an audience member, being able to watch something as a child with my parents. And I guess that's something that we've done with Mistletoe Ranch. It is absolutely something that the whole family can watch. And Steve has made plenty of films like that, and I think there's real need for that, and it provides an experience that a lot of other things don't are not suited for. So it's definitely an area that needs to be catered for, and it's really lovely working on those projects.
Excellent stuff. And it's been my great pleasure to be speaking to Rhiannon Bannenberg, the director of Mistletoe Ranch. This film is now on release in Australian cinemas. Rhiannon, thank you so much for talking with me.
Oh, thanks so much for having me.
Bye-bye.
Bye.